Hello and welcome to the FinTech Finance Virtual Arena, and today we're going to be talking about everything payments. So joining me today is Rosie McConnell from IFX. Rosie, how are you doing today?
Hi, yeah, I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Looking forward to cracking on with the week and the rest of the discussion. So with that in mind, Rosie, for our viewers who might not be aware, can you give us a bit of background to IFX, your role there, and yourself as well, please?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Rosie. I'm the head of product at IFX Payments. IFX Payments is a company that's been around for 15 years. We originally started off as a foreign exchange brokerage business, handling foreign exchange transactions on the phone. We've recently moved into the fintech space. So we've released a couple of really exciting products, which I'm looking forward to telling you about. My role is the head of product at IFX Payments. So I work with the business to establish and prioritize our objectives, and I convert those into a product roadmap, which I use to communicate with the team here at IFX. I also work very closely with the development team and act as a product owner in that capacity. So I take part in the sort of agile Scrum ceremonies. So that's my role at IFX.
Incredible. Well, I think that's perfectly placed then to answer my first question in terms of looking at the payments industry as a whole and maybe how some of the products interact with that. And the fact that payments for a lot of banks, a lot of organizations have become instant, digital, mobile as well. So I'm really interested with all those innovations within the product side. What do you see as the defining innovation, whether it be cultural or technological, when it comes to payments in the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I think it's difficult to kind of think of a maybe a defining moment, but I think what something that I'm really interested in is the amount of new companies we've got entering the payment space, which is really driving a lot of innovation in payments. So I think something that has kind of assisted with that is the regulations around open banking. I mean, that's not something that's particularly new, but it's really driven the amount of new technology that we're seeing in the payments and banking space. Myself as a consumer, I'm really excited to kind of see what comes out of the open banking, these sort of banking and payments products have been sort of owned previously by banks who've had sort of natural loyalty from customers who've been with them for a really long time, and that's been disrupted. We've seen that disruption recently from online banking services as well as mobile banking services, but I think open banking is going to disrupt that even further, and we're going to start seeing really integrated digital payments products, which can be really integrated with our lives. So I'm really excited about that as a consumer. For corporates, a lot of the values and benefits are mirrored there as well. So open banking is really going to assist corporates who have multiple relationships that they need to manage, and having one single view of that. So for example, with balances, if you're a company that has multiple relationships with banks, so local banks, open banking is going to help you view that from one single point. And I think also beyond that sort of product offering, that service offering, it's really promoting that sort of relationship or that fusion between banks and fintechs, and creating a sort of more collaborative environment, which I think is going to benefit everyone. So yeah, I'm really excited about that.
You've kind of touched on that changing nature of how open banking is going to change your bank. Now, can you tell me about what might be in store for maybe the traditional banks going into the future, that now that they have to open up their data to everyone else?
Well, I think there's some interesting tension that's kind of happening in the market now between those two kind of points about what's more important to a customer, having a sort of one-stop shop for banking and payment services, or is it more important to them to be able to sort of pick and choose banking products from multiple different sources? And the banks are really going to have to work hard to ensure that they are providing a service which is competitive with the startups and fintechs which are entering that space, and particularly that those startups are really championing the customer experience and creating products which are really enjoyable to use and really tailored for the user, and are really driven based on data and creating a personalized experience. So banks are really going to have to rethink that, because that tension is definitely there, and that competition is also incredibly interesting.
Yeah. Now, if we move towards kind of cross-border payments as well. That's been a massive shift in the payments industry, and you'd assume almost within SEPA that there would be no kind of friction when making a payment cross-border, or for instance when you're looking at different currencies and you're placing an order like that. So I mean, why does IBAN discrimination still occur, and why is there still friction when you make a cross-border payment or you look at buying currencies of different countries around the world?
Yeah, sure. So IBAN discrimination is where the merchant or the provider will refuse a transaction based on the IBAN structure, and particularly the country code. So that can happen for a couple of reasons. For example, sometimes they won't accept anything other than a local IBAN, so they won't accept the one that's local to the country they're in. Also, it can sometimes come from confusion around regulation. So we've seen, particularly following Brexit, some discrimination against GB IBANs. I think the important thing to note with that is it's illegal. IBAN discrimination is illegal, so you need to work with your sort of provider if you think that's happening, to go through the process to prevent that happening going forward. I mean, we've had a couple of cases here at IFX where that IBAN discrimination has happened. We need to work, and that's the point where you need to work quite closely with the customer to resolve that as quickly as possible, because it can, with corporate payments, it can impact, it can have impact that doesn't just impact the client, but it impacts the later beneficiary and the processes that are attached to that, for example, paying invoices or paying salary. So yeah, it's important, I think, to note on that it's legal and that you need to follow the sort of complaints process as quickly as possible.
Interesting. And you touched on kind of how for businesses as well, making these payments is so critical. There can be issues going throughout the whole workflow. Now, cross-border payments as well are increasingly becoming highly transparent. For instance, with Swift GPI, you can now really see that payment go throughout the whole process. So, how critical do you think that's going to be for businesses going forward? Is that really the most sought-after feature that businesses have been wanting from their payments going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally essential. I think this is really being led by some new technology advances in the world, and not just in payments and banking. I mean, if you think about when you're ordering food, or when you're ordering a taxi, or when you're ordering products online, the expectation is that you've got full visibility of when you're going to get that product, but also where it is in the process. So that kind of expectation is being reflected in banking and payments. We want things instantly, and if we're not going to get it instantly, then we want to know exactly when, and we want to be able to follow it through the process. So I think traceability and transparency is totally crucial. As well as sort of the timeline of the transaction. We also want to know upfront about fees. So we don't want any late fees which are coming through post purchase. That can you go through that sort of decision making process when you're initiating a transaction. Having fees hit you later means that you haven't priced it properly to start with, but also it requires additional operational processes often to handle those fees and to reconcile them. So yeah, I think it's totally essential, and especially in following sort of the COVID that we've had this year. Businesses need that. Businesses need that insurance to continue being able to work in this more digital environment.
Definitely. Now, moving the conversation slightly a bit more to IFX then, can you tell me a bit more about your Ibank solution?
Yeah. So Ibank is a really exciting product. Simply, it's a virtual IBAN solution. A virtual IBAN is very similar in the way that you kind of interact with it as a bank account. You can send funds to a virtual IBAN, and you can receive funds from a virtual IBAN. You can have a view of your balance in one single place. It's actually slightly better than some bank accounts because we can hold up to 39 currencies in that virtual IBAN view. Which all banks can. So that's one of the perks of Ibank. It's slightly different in the way that we manage the funds behind that. We're e-money issued, so the accounts are held in managed accounts. But for the client, we represent that with e-money. in these virtual IBAN accounts, these Ibank accounts. So that's the product quite simply. I think what's really exciting about Ibank is the way that businesses can apply that to their business model. So if you are a business who has payments coming in, you need to send payments out either for salary or supply payments, or you have a treasury management requirement or a foreign exchange requirement, you need to manage sort of different currencies, then Ibank can sort of fit into those processes quite nicely. So we can issue a virtual IBAN to clients instantly. You don't have the normal lead time that you do with opening bank accounts. So that's something that's really exciting. But what it means is that we can issue it immediately and flexibly in a way that fits your business model. So if you have maybe multiple teams who are handling different cash processes, then we can issue those virtual IBANs separately. So that means full cash flow segregation, and it removes that requirement for searching for funds in one big account where everything's kind of coming in and going out. So it's a really exciting product. I mean, there's something that I really enjoy is sort of speaking with our sales team and speaking with clients to see the way that they're applying the solution to their business. I've been sort of part of clients' sort of fact-finding sessions, and the sort of the initial process for kicking off that integration work is for the sales team to work with the client to see where we can fit into their business processes. And those questions that we do, there's just so many ways that you can use the Ibank. It's really great to see to see that being used.
Now, going on from to another solution in the fact that your name's IFX. So, can you tell us how you can help business clients manage their foreign exchange payments as well?
Yeah, of course. So IFX was established, about 15 years ago. We started off as a foreign exchange brokerage business. So, we know a lot about foreign exchange. We've got incredibly competitive rates. We've got access to local payment routes, so you can receive your transactions locally rather than using international routes. But I think what's the kind of value add for IFX is really around those additional fintech products that the foreign exchange service is completely integrated into. So you get the virtual IBAN solution, which can, which I mentioned, can integrate with your sort of corporate processes. We also got a mass pay solution, which allows you to, take that foreign exchange and disperse it to multiple beneficiaries, and you can do that. You can access those products through a sort of myriad of ways as well. You can do it through an API, you can do it through a CSV upload, and we've also got the application. So we've been doing foreign exchange for a really long time. We're competitive there, but I think the really exciting bit is the access to virtual IBAN, the mass pay solutions which go behind that.
I think that's so critical in a time of global flux, I think it's fair to say. So I'm intrigued as we've already brought up IBAN discrimination. Now that borders are starting to open up, if we take a kind of retrospective look at maybe the beginning of 2020, and how did IFX adapt to the changing pressures in the way that the payments industry then worked, and also the changes to the ways that you work at an organization?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the payments industry, I think what we've seen over the last year is what I would say is a lot of churn. So in terms of the country went through and the world went through an absolute massive change, and what that meant is that lots of businesses had to rethink their priorities for the year. So what we saw was some companies where the payments integration wasn't as important for them in under that scenario, and for other businesses it was now the number one thing they wanted to do. They needed to make sure that they were automating their payments processes as a key issue for them. We also saw lots of new companies entering the market, seeing the opportunity that COVID sort of created for them. And we also saw companies dropping out as well. So those businesses reprioritizing and sort of changing meant that we had to really respond really quickly to that. When I kind of look at the plans that we had, or the plans that we built for customers in terms of ramp up and go live, over the last year, the tolerance for that process being slow is very low. It's very low. So we've had to work really efficiently and quickly to launch customers and help them go to market with these products. In terms of our ways of working, there've been a few changes for us actually. We were already working, able to work remotely. That was a perk that IFX offered. So we were sort of in a good position when lockdown happened to be able to respond to that quickly. I think over the last year we've sort of learned a few lessons in terms of collaboration. I mean, that's something that is very different when you've got something that I really love about my job is the sort of kick-off process for projects, and typically that's a session where we have the stakeholders and the impacted users all in one room, sort of hashing out the problem and defining and prioritizing the stages of the project together in one room, and you really bounce off each other in that session, and it's a really efficient way to work. We couldn't do that, so we had to take it online, and it's slightly different when you're doing it online. You can't really bounce off each other in the same way. Interruptions don't really work, so we had to kind of work a bit harder to make sure that we were documenting things clearly, that we had lots of information up front, and we were documenting that clearly at the other end as well. That's been a really big change for us. But as well as that, the IFX team has expanded hugely over the last year. We've gone from one development team this time last year, and we're now looking at boarding our third team. So we're going through a process as well of scaling our agile processes. So that's something that has been really interesting for us. How can we make sure that our teams are enabled and working efficiently in this new environment? There isn't just a new way of working, but also at scale and with lots of new people joining. It's been a really interesting process for the last year, and we're looking at expanding the teams further later on. So yeah, I think it's been a success for us.
Brilliant. Now, speaking of expanding the team, and one thing I've read, that's close to your heart as well, is empowering women in fintech and tech roles. In fact, I think the US report over in the US has been reported that women in financial technology roles only make up about 25% or so of C-suite tech positions. Can you tell us a bit more about what IFX does to kind of embrace that inclusion and ultimately change that terrible dynamic that's been plaguing the fintech industry for years?
It's difficult. I think there are those sort of disparities of representation in the fintech world. I mean, I've been incredibly lucky in that I've had some really strong leadership in my career, people that I've been able to learn specific skill sets from, and it's really important to me that I'm able to pass that back. So we've got a few different sort of processes that go on at IFX to ensure diversity. I mean, we're a totally diverse team, but I think the thing that I really like to champion mainly is the sort of cognitive diversity. I think it's really important that you've got lots of different people in the room who think differently and process things differently, and therefore you're getting a really good disparity of opinions, which means when you're working on projects, you've got lots of information and knowledge to work from to find the correct outcome. So and I think that sort of cognitive diversity comes from people with different experiences. So you do need to make sure that when you're looking at your workforce, have people got different backgrounds and have people got different life experiences, which they're going to be able to draw on, and we can benefit to create these different products. At IFX Payments, we've got a really fantastic team of diverse colleagues. I think it's something to be really mindful of, and something that I try to observe quite carefully when we're hiring is what sort of conscious and unconscious things am I doing to ensure that I'm promoting this and making it a good place to work for all types of people. So I think it is something that's really important to me, and I've benefited from some really strong leadership, and I'm trying to pass that on in lots of different ways in my hiring processes, and I'm also mentoring as well, because that's something that really helps me kind of get to the position where I am today.
Incredible. And I think we're coming up to time, but if we could have a short burst of finding out what's next for IFX then, and with this brilliant, kind of move to kind of hire more, and obviously coming out of the lockdown and the pandemic, I'm excited to hear what's next for you guys.
Yeah, we've got a really exciting couple of years coming up. Instant payments or real-time payments is something that is a real driver for us. And when you think of instant payments, you think more about settlement times. But there's a lot that happens before the transaction actually leaves our environment that we need to look at to ensure that the payment is instant. So when I talk about sort of pre-payment, I'm thinking about things like customer authentication, so secure customer authentication, and the use of biometrics. Are we sure that the person who's instructing this payment is the person that they say they are? We're also looking at authorization. So we deal a lot with corporate payments. Is the person who's making the payment allowed to make that payment? And then you kind of get into the compliance world as well, which has lots of different processes going on. We've got, anti-fraud measures, and there's lots of things you can leverage there in terms of AI and, third-party providers who've got, amazing solutions which will help us automate that process of payments going out. So we've got a lot of work going on to look at that, that when a transaction gets instructed and when it leaves the environment, what are all the processes that we've got along there? Who are the actors? Who are the providers that are part of that journey? And how can we ensure that they are happening in as automated way as they can, so that payment gets out instantly? And as well as that, once it's left our environment, do we have the right channels in place for it to hit the beneficiary immediately?
Amazing. Well, Rosie, thank you so much for your time. I think that is all we have time for. And also to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. You can catch the rest of the series and much more over at www.fintechf.com, and of course YouTube and LinkedIn, where I'll see you in the comments. So Rosie, once again, thank you very much. And I hope to see you again soon, and goodbye.